Welcome back to the Bigwater Podcast. If you've listened, you've probably heard my longtime friend Bruce Samson. You may know him as Dr. Sonar, high-tech fishing, whatever it is, but without a doubt, the most questions we get are about electronics, and there is no man that knows more about it than him that I'm aware of. And he kind of breaks down some stuff, new stuff, old stuff, even a few things that we stumped him with. Questions. Remember that, producer dude? We've got some good stuff in this one. Bruce, he brought it. Welcome to the Bigwater Podcast. I'm Ross Robertson. Hopefully you've seen some of our stuff. If not, go check it out. Bigwater Fishing, just about everywhere. Producer dude likes to remind me that we need to do that.
And you did it right off the top without me having to ask this time. So we are, 27, 30 episodes in? I don't know where we're at, but...
We should be better at this.
You finally did it without me having to remind you.
When you try to rope in a guy like me, if you've watched any of the videos, you know, I mean, God knows the producer guy probably deserves a trophy trying to rope us in, especially when you get guys like Country Steve. And if you don't know who Country Steve is, you definitely haven't watched our stuff. But, you know, Instagram, Facebook, Bigwater Fishing. You go to, I mean, God, just about anything. YouTube, I mean, bigwaterfishing.com. And now we've got a lot of stuff on there. Yes, I run a guide service. We got a bunch of guys that want to take you fishing. We got 5 of us to do that. But Bigwater Fishing right now, we're really kind of focused on teaching people stuff, right, producer dude?
Yeah, that's been the focus.
We're trying to entertain you a little bit too. We've got a lot of stuff.
Well, you know, you kind of waver. Sometimes you're entertaining. Sometimes you're a little obnoxious, if we want to go that far. But
probably. Yeah. I like the term edgy. Makes my mom feel better.
Edgy. Yes. Yeah. Like the episode where you did your bleep limit in the first 3 minutes with Country Steve.
This is true.
And then you proceeded to apologize to your mother.
I did
for it.
You can go watch that. Yeah.
Yeah. But then had her talked about her drinking wine at book club. So then you reoffended her. So
right. Yeah. So that was when I just, like, you know how you go in there and you can block from one person on Facebook, like block this post from one person. Block mom. Any rate, we have got a guy who, ironically, people think he's a dry guy. You know, because you got 2 Bruces. I was literally traveling with Bruce when I was in high school. Long story. Watched some of their stuff to find out that. But actually, the first podcast we did with Bruce. But Bruce has really got a big personality. I think you're going to see it a little bit here. Hopefully today we're going to try to pull it out of him because Bruce doesn't give a shit as much as he used to. He's basically retired. And I joke about that, you know, we had to steal time from his pool hustling, which is actually really a thing today.
Right.
He's, however many hours he's, you know, doing this pool hustling today. But we were able to sneak them out, and we're going to talk about some of the electronic stuff. Because when we did the last podcast, producer dude, your inbox with just the comments and stuff was like, whoa, people know the electronics things is crazy.
Yep.
And so we're going to kind of do a little different. We're going to pick out like the high points. So people, like, these are the things that seem to apply to everybody. And Bruce is going to give us his high-tech approach to it.
I liked the first podcast last season with Bruce. He takes that real scientific approach. He's an actual doctor.
He's a medical doctor.
He takes that scientific approach to fishing, and it's you know, you can learn a lot from that.
But roping in Bruce is like roping in me, so we will see how this goes. Bruce Samson, welcome back to the Bigwater Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time. I know you're a busy guy, even though you're kind of doing, I don't know if I've known you for like 20 plus years, so I can say you're kind of doing old people stuff a little bit, right? Are we allowed to say where you're at right now?
Old people stuff. I call it an adventure.
Okay, that's what I will. That's probably what I'll call it too.
I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and I ride a fat tire bike in the desert. And I'm in pool tournaments. I don't know. It's just I'm just having a lot of fun walking, hiking.
Let's be honest. For anybody that doesn't know Bruce, you're super, super, super competitive. That's probably why you were so successful in the medical field and obviously fishing as well. But you are now like a pool hustler. I mean, I know you're not going to say that, but now you told me we had to move up this podcast because you were practicing 7 hours today.
Only 6.
Oh, only my bad. How dare I exaggerate? It would have been 7 if I wouldn't have cut into your pool time. But any rate, well, I appreciate your time, because honestly, you know, anybody that wants to know more about electronics, and I don't know any angler, and I think you probably will agree with this, most anglers claim to know everything, but if there's one thing that they will admit that they don't know enough about, it's their electronics.
I agree. You know, I teach, classes at a walleye school, and they, all they want is electronic information. You know, they don't, the fishing information, they don't feel is important, because they feel like they could do that already, even though they can't, because, the thing is that there's so much more when you get to the, high level competitive fishing. It's a lifestyle. You have to be full time at it to be good. You just have to be. In electronics, I've done it full time. I mean, I've studied it. I've tried to suck information out of the software engineers that write the code for these sonars. They're way over my head, but I know how to turn it into practical information, because I've learned that if I see more fish, I catch more fish. And if I stay on those fish, the live well gets full.
No doubt.
If they're the right fish.
So anybody that wants to know a little bit more Bruce's background, we've done a podcast, and that's why we're having you on again, because so many people liked, this information about electronics. And me and you talked about your background and stuff like that. We got into electronics quite a bit too, but make sure you go either watch or listen to some of the stuff that we did with Bruce earlier. But right now, kind of what I think we're going to do is we're going to narrow this down with all the people that had the questions. A lot of people have the same questions. They're afraid to ask it out loud, but we got a lot of messages afterwards. And, one of the biggest was that we'll start with on our kind of cheat sheet here is fish size, right? And it sounds crazy, but I don't know as much about electronics as you do, but I've definitely learned on my home body water, Lake Erie, there's an awful lot of guys that have their sensitivity way too high, and they're basically fishing white bass thinking that they're the world record walleye. And there's a lot of different factors on fish size, and why don't you kind of run me by through some of those so that we properly get a better understanding?
Yeah, when you listen to this, you're going to realize why it's so hard to do fish size. It is not easy, okay? So the best thing to do is leave your auto sensitivity on, and because that'll change depending on depth, depending on clutter, and give you a pretty accurate signal strength of the different fish size. Okay, so fish look different on 2D sonar, on down imaging, and on side imaging. On side imaging, I call them, they look more like torpedoes when you're moving. Down imaging, they look like dots. On 2D sonar, they look like fish arches. Okay, so the size of the fish is depending on the size of the dot or the arch. So if it's just a round dot, if it's a bigger white dot, it's a bigger fish. For the side imaging, if it is a bigger torpedo, it's a bigger fish. If it's on 2D sonar, if the arch is bigger, it's a bigger fish. I'm not talking about length. The length of the arch is just how long the fish is under your boat or under the transducer.
And that's a big one. I mean, I don't know how many people are in the boat with me like, oh my God, look at that thing. It's all across the screen. It's like, no, he's just swimming with us. So.
Yeah. Then that happens in Erie because your fish are suspended and they swim. And if you get one swimming with you, you're going to have a long arch. So it's the thickness of the arch.
And primarily in the center, right?
Yep. The thickest part of the fish arch is your best idea to use on how big the fish is. Now, you also have color because, the sonar now shows the strength of the sound that's reflected back, the echo or the signal, whatever you want to call it. And stronger signals have different colors, and you need to know that. It's pretty easy to tell. The strongest signal is usually the same color as the bottom, because the bottom reflects the most. So if your bottom, it depends on your color scheme. There's different ones. Say the strongest return is yellow. So if you have more yellow in your fish arch, bigger fish. But I like the thickness of the arch the best for me. That's what I go by. Now, if the fish is on the edge of the cone, it doesn't reflect as much sound because the cone is as weaker as it goes out to the edge. And that's a whole topic right now. And I mean, that could be different. I need diagrams to explain all that. But so it's hard to tell fish on the edge of the cone, how big they are. But the information that you do have, if you drive around and look enough, is that the thickest part of the fish arch is the biggest fish in the area.
Now,
if they're thicker.
Interjecting in that, because I think I already know the answer because me and you have done these schools together, is I look for on like Lake Erie, for example, when we're out in big, deep open water that's pretty clean, I also look for what I call tails, because I know that I marked that fish on the outside of both cones. And so therefore he was in that cone, even when he was way out there, he was still big enough that I got a signal, where maybe a 1 or 2 pound fish, you wouldn't hardly see anything. But if it's a decent sized fish, I'm going to see that fish as soon as he enters the cone and as soon as he leaves it, like on the extreme outer edges, right? I call that fish tails.
That's true. You know, I use it like a minnow on the edge of the cone doesn't show up, and a shark looks like a really nice fish. Right. It's just that the signal's so weak on the edge of the cone, it needs a bigger fish to reflect it.
We're going to put a diagram up there showing this. We'll probably try to steal a few screenshots from you, or a couple little diagrams, because I think that it's so hard with fishermen, you know, as we talk about this, or some people will be watching this on YouTube, until you see it with your own eyes, it's hard to comprehend exactly what you're saying, especially if you're really newer at the game. But is there anything else on fish size? I mean, I know like scrolling speed and depth range, you know, the analogy I use is like shooting a shotgun. At 10 feet away, it's going to cut you open. At 100 feet, you can catch the BBs. Tell me a little bit about that.
Scrolling speed is the same as boat speed. Basically, you know, if you run a scrolling speed fast, the fish look like longer arches. And the main thing is depth, okay? So fish that are on a 15-foot depth scale in shallow water look huge. When you get out to 90 feet, they just have little thin lines. And so you got to add that in, too, is that depending on your depth range, the size of the fish arch or the size of the dot, you have to add that together. It gets really hard, you know. What do they look like on a 30-foot scale? What do they look like on a 100-foot scale? If you're on a 40-foot scale, if the fish is at 15 feet and another fish is at 90 feet, the one that's at 15 feet will look bigger because it's closer to the transducer and reflects more of the energy, because the energy of the sound going through the water weakens as it goes farther down. And so, a lot of factors.
And I've listened to enough of your stuff, you know, and again, we've taught these classes together. Ultimately, the best way to tell what a fish size is
catch them.
That's right. Sometimes that's easier said than done, but you know, it's amazing. I think that is the best. You know, learning. Ice fishing has taught me the most about sonar, probably because it's a more controlled atmosphere. I mean, I can make my jig look like a 2x4 down there, but yet I can make my jig disappear with you adjust sensitivity. But then also on the inside of the cone, the outside of the cone, you know, and then again, when you catch those fish and you see what it looks like, and then you catch that exact fish, and you go, I thought that was a huge one and it's a 2-pounder, or I thought that was a 2-pounder and it was a huge one because that fish came in from the outside of the cone. There's no substitution, as much as you listen to me and you, as to just going out and doing it.
You know, another thing about ice fishing that really helps people understand how close they see fish to the bottom. Now, you can tell people that have never ice fished, they go, you see everything. Look at that fish, he's right on the bottom. When you see a fish, that fish isn't on the bottom. Ice fishermen know this all the time. Their screen can be blank. They lift their jig up, and they don't see it if it's on the bottom. They have to lift it up a ways before they can see it. And that's just the way the physics of the sonar works. It does not see fish that are laying on the bottom.
There's probably, in my opinion, with fish and ice fishing in particular, like I'm using a Helix ice unit, there's probably, and I don't care what brand you use, there's probably a 6 to 8 inch thing. And part of that's the mud that I'm fishing, or if there's rocks and different layers, right? But there's like that 6 inch period, like you said, between you seeing it and touching bottom.
Sure. And how many fish do you know that are 8 inches thick?
Not as many as I'd like to.
You can hide a lot of fish.
Yeah, not as many as I like to. Is there anything else on fish size that could help us out, or we kind of covered that one pretty good?
I think it's, well, here's another thing is like, on side imaging or fish size, you don't even see the fish when you have a wide range. They're just little tiny dots out there. So if you want to be able to identify fish with side imaging, shrink your range. You're going to see more fish. What I do is I use a short range of say 70 feet when I want to see fish. If I'm looking for structure, I'm scanning. If you scan for structure and you have your range set at 120 feet, think what you're looking at 2/3 of a football field almost. That's a nice scanning area, but think about seeing a fish in that side. I like to get down to like 70 feet, and I see that's what I like. I mean, they even get better at 30 feet, but then you're not scanning out very far because it just doesn't have the range. So that's a good point. Let's see. Other things are with down imaging, you can change the contrast in some models and make the fish show out better. Mostly nowadays I just use sensitivity. Like I have a Helix like you have, and if I want to change my sensitivity, I just do the plus and minus buttons. It's so simple.
Another one that's a huge one, and it's following a trail. And to me, this really is for a lot of different people, because it could be for one guy, he's got a milk run of spots that he's gonna jig. Or it could be he's just trying to navigate a channel that's full of stumps or an old river rocks or whatever it may be, right? But following a trail is something that can be pretty expensive if not done properly.
It's really expensive for the guys that stay zoomed out when they follow a trail, because they can be 50 feet off the trail and look like they're pretty much close to it. And, that if you're navigating to a dangerous area, you got to zoom in.
Sounds simple, but people don't do it.
They don't do it. And probably, the best way is if you have, you split this, if you have 2 units on the bow, run your map screen on split chart, and have one chart kind of zoomed out, because then you can look ahead and see where you're going, and then have one on the zoom so you can keep yourself on the trail. Yeah, because if you get too far zoomed in, then you can't, if there's a quick turn up ahead, you can't anticipate it. And so that split screen if the problem is, well, it's not as much a problem now because people are starting to have more units on their boat. It used to be that all you needed was a map and a sonar. And so one unit worked fine. Now they have side imaging, down imaging, a map, 2D sonar, and you want to see all of them. So you really need 2 units to see all of them. Or like me, I have 4. But I use more than one brand, so I want to see, I need to see more than other people.
I understand there's space and budgetary concerns for everybody, but you're 100% right. I have 2 12-inch GPSs on my dash, and I do just what you said. And even I do the same thing when I ice fish. People are always like, why do you have so many units? I mean, it's a backup. But the other thing is that we just got done with our ice season here. And when we were out in Idaho, we had slush pockets, and there was these very small defined trails. And when it's darker and low light, if you're 10 feet off, you're going to bury yourself in a bank, right? And it was really, really important to not vary more than maybe 2 or 3 feet off. So I did, just what you said, I've been doing that forever. I had split screen. One is zoomed in as far as I could. The other was out so I could kind of see the general direction and what was going on. And it makes a big difference for safety, as does it if you're trying to navigate a stump field or outside, like Sault Ste. Marie is a place for us where you're in a 30-foot channel or you're in 2 foot of solid rock that's been carved out. And if you miss, it's expensive. Like your lower unit is gone.
Or you could do like the bass guys do in the stump field. Go wide open, trim it up high, and pray.
I like to rely on other methods than that. But is there anything else on the following a trail thing? I think the awareness is as much as everything. But
yeah, just one thing on trails is that, if you have a danger area, it's probably good to make a waypoint on every bad spot. So you have that as a reference on the screen too, besides the trail. And you might just want to eliminate all your trails and just idle through on the best way through and save that trail as a different color permanently, so it's on your map every time you come, and it's a different color, and that's for the really bad spots. But I know people that do that. I have done it. I don't have to do it anymore because I don't need to. But it's one way of doing it. Just so you have then you can give it to your friends too, if they trust you.
I was so gonna go there because people just know how much me and you mess with each other. It's unbelievable. But so here's the other one: struggling with side imaging. I think everybody just about now knows that I need to use this technology. Like it's an asset. It's not like it's like an underwater camera and people think it's gimmicky or I need it or I don't. Like side imaging is almost necessary, but it seems like guys are really intimidated by it and they struggle with it.
But the number one reason is they don't turn it on enough. Okay. So when I first got side imaging, I didn't have enough screens, and so I'd turn it on and look, but then I wanted to get all the other information. I wanted to see down imaging and 2D sonar and on a map, and I would you'd sometimes put the side imaging on a small screen. You realize it doesn't work on a split screen. Until I had a designated 9-inch unit that I just used side imaging on. I left it on all the time. And then all of a sudden it started to make sense. You start seeing, you just get better at it when you run it all the time. And you start spotting, I see fish when I'm moving at, say, 0.5 miles an hour. I'll see fish off to the side. I'll put a waypoint on them, and I'll go over there, and sometimes bingo. And you would not see those fish otherwise.
We're still learning what, side imaging, and like now with the 360 with hummingbird's pretty amazing. But one of the guides that runs for me, he has been basically turning left or right, because obviously when you're out fishing where I am, you just kind of aimlessly go to a certain degree. Once you get in that general area, right? And, he's watching that side imaging and he's looking, and when he sees, fish on the right side, he turns that way. And more often than not, he's turning onto a school instead of turning out of a school unknowingly.
Yeah, why not? It's just more information to use. But you can't learn that until you turn it on all the time. You have to have it running all the time. And it's, I asked this question, the people that are struggling with side imaging, I asked them, I said, well, what have you done? They've all done the same thing. They turn it on, drive around for a while, and then they turn it off and use the other stuff. And there's enough YouTube videos. I have a DVD just on teaching people per hummingbird how to interpret their side imaging with lots of images. It helps, but the main thing you have to do is turn it on and leave it on and look at it.
And a short story is I put up these screenshots. You're on my social media stuff, and you see I put these screenshots up, and it without fail, I get multiple messages every time I do. I do Sonar Sunday, and I'll have a screenshot up there, and somebody will say, please tell me what your settings are. My screen doesn't look like that. What are your secret settings? And I always tell them, I don't have any secret settings. I'm running it, it's one of a couple things, your sensitivity, like we kind of talked about. But the other biggest thing is transducer, location, the angle, the height, or just the location. And I had recently had a guy who said, no, that's not it. He sent me back 3 or 4 messages. I've moved my transducer 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, you can move it 25 times if it's not in the right spot and it's not, putting that right signal out, whether it's 2D, side imaging, 360, or whatever it is. And I can't imagine you wouldn't agree with that a lot of people have not gotten that side imaging transducer. If you're going to plow with your boat, you need to tail that up a little bit so that side imaging transducer is actually flat at the speed you're running at. I think that's probably one of the biggest tips I like to give people. Yeah,
and actually, I think the biggest mistake is the side to side. They have it tilted so that one beam is shooting more straight down, the other one's shooting more high, and they get a bright bottom on one side and a dark on the other, and they can't see out as far on one side. But you and I have put on a lot of transducer, so for us it's easy. We've already made all those mistakes. For somebody that just gets a boat and gets his first or second side imaging transducer, it's not easy getting it set up.
I wish the guys would watch both of our stuff, because I remember when we did that walleye school down in Ohio, we had a guy who had his transducer upside down. I don't know if you remember that. And and he was like, this unit's junk. I need a new unit. What should I get? And we had everybody's boat out there. That's why those walleye schools that you still do are amazing, because you get first-hand information. You get to see that. It's not, maybe coulda, woulda, shoulda, and through the phone. You get to see, like, right here. And we switched that guy's transducer around. He went out, and it was just a Phillips screwdriver, and we got him going. But people don't understand how micro adjustments to these, like you said, left to right, the angle, the height. If the water that's coming over it, the air bubbles that are created, whether it's from your motor, from a drain, from a strake, from whatever it may be on the boat itself, that's going to cause a dirty picture. And that's going to just compound your problem. And that's what your problem is, not the unit. Occasionally the transducer, if you hit a log or something, you might need a new one. But transducer location to me is by far the biggest thing. And I tell people on, and they just don't listen.
Yeah, the only way to really to tell them is for you to be there to look at it. I try to do it with pictures. It's really hard to tell somebody what's wrong with their transducer when they send you pictures. We do that, at the walleye school we did with you, and we've learned to do that at the Vermilion one we do. When they get there and sign in, the lodge, they put their boats in for them. We look at their transducers. And, and it's really nice there, because anybody who's having trouble with like high speed readings, that's a common problem. They get on plane and they don't know what depth it is. Well, you don't want to do that in Lake Vermilion. It has a bunch of rocks. And so you just take it out, and like when you say micro adjustments, it might be 1/8 of an inch that I make a guy's day. I mean, he's so happy, because all of a sudden now he's driving down the lake not knowing what the depth is not much fun.
No. So that, I don't want to jump ahead, because that's another question we kind of just touched on, but probably the biggest one we have right now, the biggest one I'm getting, we're actually getting ready to put a video out showing how I'm rigging my boat now. I'm using lithium batteries. So I've completely changed, because now I'm able to. Again, when me and you first started, we weren't pulling not even an amp, like maybe 700 or 800 milliamps for a unit, and we had 1 or 2. Now, just like you mentioned, your units are pulling anywhere from 3 to 5 amps, and you've got 4 of them. And we're using the same stuff as we were before, and it just doesn't work. So I'll let you kind of jump on this, but we need a bigger battery, and we need a proper wire for that battery, because you can't use that same 16 gauge that we used for those units that pulled like 700 milliamps, those black and white or those smaller units, right?
Once you get to the stage where you're running two big screens, the screen is what takes the power. The bigger the screen, the more power it's a light. Then they have to have a bright light so that you can see that during daylight. And the bigger the screen, the more light they have to put on it. So the big screen models are the ones that suck the juice. So you put two of those on there on your boat, and you might as well give up thinking you're going to do it with one battery to start your motor and run your bilge pump and run your live well and run those units. Just give up and get two batteries. And thing is, what I do, and I know you do the same way, is that I get one battery for electronics. And what I do is I run 8-gauge wire, which is overkill, but the power
not by
goes
much.
through. Not by much. It's better to have too thick a wire than too thin a wire. That's simple. So I run 8-gauge wire up to a Blue Sea fuse panel. And that fuse panel, then I run all my graphs off of that. And since I've done that, I very seldom see much of a voltage drop. When your battery at the back is 12.6, 12.7, and you're only reading, 12.1 on your unit when you use the digital overlay. Now, it never will be exact, okay, because they're measuring the internal voltage of the unit, which isn't the voltage that reaches the unit. But when you see that much of a drop, you either have not thick enough wire or you have to redo your connections. And the more connections you have, the more the power drop. Now, when you use the boat company's electrical system, they run that up there. They run it through fuses. They run it through. They have way more crimps and connections before you can get to your unit. And having that one straight one to one Blue Sea fuse panel is the cleanest way to do your power.
Another big one and I think, the reason I kind of chose some of these, or really the people chose them because those was questions after questions that we get, but is the ones we're highlighting are ones that when you listen to them, they seem simple, like fish size. Sounds simple, but yet they're very easily confused by people. And the other one that's on that is chart issues. With the cursor. I mean, you told me a story been a while ago, but about your cursor story. Somebody had the cursor on for like the entire year. Tell me about chart issues.
Well, it'll be somebody in this podcast will go, bingo. I can fix that because I've so many times. It's if you have the cursor up on the chart doesn't follow the boat vessel. And so you drive off the screen. And I've had more than one guy that have used it for the summer fishing, where they had to zoom in and zoom out and move the chart to follow their boat. And that would be so painful. And when you show them that, they just look at you like, oh my God. And they're happy. That's one thing about doing teaching is that you do get to make people happy. And
I think it's even worse now with the touchscreen options that are out there, because people will lean up against it. And every now and then, my producer dude over here is laughing because he all the time, and I keep all the noises on when you hit the buttons, because producer dude, I don't know how many times he's either hit I actually moved my jack plate. He doesn't even know this. I moved my jack plate switch now because he's smashed it so many times with my motor going up and down. And he's leaned into it, and I mean,
and then you yell at me,
and I yell at him.
You like freak out, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, we're like, I'm about ready to burn the fuse out on my jack plate as it's. But the same thing, with the screen where the camera guy leans up against it, your buddy leans up against it, your kid leans up against it, and now all of a sudden you're hitting waypoints, or you've just realistically taken that map cursor, and you're not where you think you are, right? So even if you reach over and you go to hit a waypoint, you're not hitting a waypoint where you think you are. You're not seeing where you're at. You're not seeing it. Again, so simple, but yet I mean, we joke about it with producer dude, but I mean, it's a reality.
Here's another thing on chart issues. When you're fishing a waypoint, your boat sometimes spins for some people. And the reason is that they leave their chart on heading up instead of north up. Heading up is fine when you're traveling down the lake. You're traveling down the lake, you know that if you want to turn right, you turn right and it goes right on the chart. If you're running south with north up, it looks like you need to go right on the map. You actually need to turn left. So for a lot of people that can't do that in their head, heading up is great for navigation. But when you get to the spot and you stop the boat and move a little bit, the whole map moves. And it disorientates you when you're trying to fish a waypoint.
Okay, so I want to interject here before I forget. I need to be educated real quick. On Humminbird, what really is the difference between course up and heading up? Because they're both options. You've got north up, but you've got course up, and you've got heading up. Do you know what the
course up is? If you have it on go to a waypoint, it's going to be the course up is going to be going. It's always going to be up towards that waypoint. That's the way. I don't even use that anymore. I never use go to a waypoint. I always just look at it on the map and drive to it. I'm just not one of those people that does the course up. I hope I got that right. I have to think about that because I haven't thought about course up because I don't use it anymore. Well, we'll call that a dumb idea.
I might have stumped Dr. Sonar. I like it.
You did, and I've explained that in my DVDs, and then I don't even use course up. Heading up just means that it's the way the boat is pointing when you're moving is going to be north, or it's going to aim that way. That's all it does.
Yeah, and truthfully, because of the distances that I'm going, I'm not fishing some of those things like your little small crappie right there. When I'm going 15, 20, 25 miles, I like that because it helps me navigate around, let's say, an obstruction or whatever it may be. Because my brain doesn't I hate when you have north up and you're going south and you're trying to, that throws my brain in loop.
It just depends on about half the people like north up and half the people like heading up. And it just depends on what you get used to and the way, for me, maps are easy. Not everybody can read a map easy. I can read maps easy. I go north up, I drive south, I know which way to turn. The only time I used heading up was in tournaments on rivers where you had to make lots of turns when you're avoiding obstructions, like on the Missouri River at Bismarck. And so I couldn't think fast enough to say, all right, I need to turn right, but I have to turn left to do that. It's too quick for me. So then I used the heading up, and then I could navigate it better.
Yeah, to me, it's just it's a no-brainer, but each into their own. So another one that's on our list is, and I'm going to give you a little quick story in this, is map cards. And I've got a video out there on my YouTube page too showing how to clean a map card, But two things that happen, and I know you'll probably, maybe this is where you're going with it, but I know we've had a lot of people with issues with those, is a moisture in the slot or a dirty card will not only cause it not to read or flash or go in and out, but I've actually had it where it'll lock up a unit.
Mm-hmm.
Where I take the map card out and everything's perfect because the card was dirty and there was moisture in there and it was almost like shorting it out. So what is some tips and advice on map cards that you see people having problems with that's obviously very avoidable?
Well, Yeah, I've seen that too. And I don't know if it's the moisture or the dirty, but it doesn't hurt to do both of those. But sometimes you just have a bad card and it'll freeze up your unit. I mean, there's something wrong with the card. They're not perfect. They fail. It's just electronics. But the things about map cards is that I love Lake Master. Okay, I really like the way they do their maps, and so I have to have a Lake Master for wherever I'm going. But I've also learned, there's a reason why our Humminbird allows you to use Navionics too, because sometimes you want to use a Navionics chip. Now, they're not equal. They're not. They collect their data different. I would say that even on the same lake, you can have different quality. Overall, it's going to always be the best with Lake Master, in my opinion. But sometimes I could find a little better spot where they mapped it better with the Navionics that they didn't with Lake Master. And so I use both. I always have Navionics running and Lake Master running at the same time.
Lake Master, even on a body of water like Lake Erie, is a game changer. I tend to use Hummingbird's built-in mapping when I don't want to see specifics, meaning like if I'm running a long ways and I just want to see major hazards. I don't want to see all that craziness, and tons of contours.
Sure.
I don't need that. But then when I'm slowing down or I'm fishing individual things, but very short story, not that long ago, we got back and we did from Idaho, we did a perch trip. And I couldn't find anybody that had a Western, because all my buddies are not West Coast. And a couple of my buddies out there, actually Troy Linder, he had his boat in storage and was someplace else and couldn't get access to his chips because Lake Master was sold out everywhere. And I was just going nuts, and I know you know this. I think I even asked you for a chip, matter of fact.
Yeah, you did.
Yep. When you didn't have it, I knew that, oh boy, probably nobody does. But so I went online on Hummingbird's site, and I actually downloaded just the lake that we were fishing onto a blank SD card. And
Perfect.
I sat at home, like this is stuff, I don't care if you're a tournament fisherman or not, or you're fishing on a little lake and you're trying to learn it or do your own auto chart mapping. But I sat at home several nights there with a little, I got a little battery set up for my big 12-inch Helix. And it's a big screen, like you said, is really important for this because the mapping you're going to see when it's zoomed in or zoomed out is different. Like the scale, like it's basically like a human zip drive there on that. And the two best spots that we fished, without a doubt, are spots that I hit a icon or a waypoint there, say, I want to fish here. And I found them sitting on my couch in Ohio before we drove 2,200 miles or 2,100 miles, whatever it was. And that's just stuff that you without mapping, we were fishing just spot on the spot stuff. And there was a lot of it that didn't work, but to not have mapping nowadays, man, because I get comments, on some of the social media stuff, and I just laugh at these guys because they're just clueless. This is not, if you're not utilizing that, you're just nuts. It's like not having a cell phone in today's day and age and run a business.
Absolutely. You should never go to a new lake without having good information. And the most important part of the new information is to already know what the bottom of the lake looks like. And that's what the map does for you. It gives you the clues where the fish are. It's just like, it's kind of like, not everybody's going to like this, but it's like if you wanted to hunt humans, you go to the mega mall. You don't go to the golf course because they're spread out.
No, you didn't.
So
no, you
if
didn't.
you're going to hunt fish,
you
go find the spots that the fish like to be and congregate. It's no different.
In today's day and age, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. I'm going to ignore that. You are not wrong. But oh my God, I'm the one that puts my foot in my mouth. But thank you for taking over the lead deal on that. But not everybody understands a structure. You and I have an advantage. We fish all the time,
So we have lots of information to know that those little humps off of a point are almost always good. And, you say, well, I got to find that, or you always look at points. You look at, it's just so much. Well, so much that the map gives you for starting points. It doesn't mean the fish are going to be there, but it gives you a high percentage places to go look.
I mean, I'm going to move on after I tell you this, but even on that trip, it's just amazing to me. I had a bunch of emails from people that were like, hey, how come you talking about this? Like, I'm giving people the real information. If you really want help, like, I'm giving it to them, and they don't even take it as that. Like, they just think it's gimmicky or I'm pushing a sponsor or something. But on that trip, we caught our fish. At one point, it was like 25 feet of water, and we were on a reservoir, and you know how reservoirs are. 25 feet of water down on this end and that end tend to be still good for that given time. And I'm on a snowmobile, I'm on a body of water I've never been on. We got 2 feet of snow, travel was difficult. And, I depth highlighted select 25 feet plus or minus 2 or 3 feet or something like that. And I'm driving down this reservoir I've never been on that's, huge, 30 some miles an hour in a snowmobile. I stop, I drill one hole, and we just murder the fish. And a guy 15, 20 feet away, not doing anything. And when you don't have much real estate moving around like you don't ice fishing, but even in a boat, that's huge. But then the next thing is, because I even had a guy say, well, that's great, but what's next? And I'm just thinking, God, are you guys really that hard-headed with this? Because then those fish move shallow, okay, a couple days later. And I changed that depth highlight select, to the new depth. And now I had a whole new body of water, but I eliminated all of that ineffective, inefficient water because I didn't know. Like on Lake Erie, I know where it's 20 feet or where it's here or where it's that. And we found some little pockets away from everybody, and we were drilling holes where there was nobody at. And that really was the game changer. And I absolutely could not have had that success without the Lake Master or the 360. Those two things allowed me to fine tune that body of water. Not that I perfected it there, but it allowed us to catch fish on a body of water unguided that I'd never been on before.
You're one of the few people that I know that uses that depth highlight. It just works. Finding fish at a certain depth is, and then understanding that you need to find other depths because that's the pattern. And you got to find that same. It might be as simple that the depth outline is a little wider or a little narrower. So you want to be on the wide parts of that depth outline. And of course, you have to have a very high definition map to use depth outline effectively. That's what Lake Master has because they've mapped these lakes. If they haven't mapped them, the depth highlight doesn't work because it's got to be a well-mapped lake.
I've been fishing or guiding, 20, almost 25 years. I've been fishing over 30 years on my home body of water, and I still use it to this day. So it's that important, As soon as that came available, I was all over that. But moving on, another big one that we get is losing depth on plane. That is a super huge one that you see in comments, on your stuff on High Tech Fishing and Dr. Sonar. I see it on my stuff, guys complaining. Tell me your thoughts. I've got a few, but I'm interested to hear what your experiences are with that.
Well, if you have a glassed-in transducer, it may be that it's got a crack in it and there's air between the transducer and the bottom of the boat. You can find that out easy. You can just pull the fuse out of your bilge and pour water in the bottom. The water will seep in the crack, displace the air, and your transducer will then work. Okay?
That's a good tip. Make sure you don't pull your bilge and your fuse when you're out in 30 feet of water in the middle of the lake. That sounds like an on-the-trailer tip.
Well, you can do it out. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But
I'm half joking, but that's not something you want to try out in the middle of nowhere.
But the most common problem is that when there are transit mounted transducers, and they're either the most common mistake is that they put the transducer too low, and that what it is then the transducer is pushing water and creating turbulence. Think of them, they're skimmers, basically. You want them just to skim the water that's coming off the back of the boat. So you basically, it's better to just guess where it's, I use a ruler, and I try to make the transducer so that it's maybe an eighth of an inch below where the water's coming off the back of the boat. And then you just adjust it up and down by an eighth of an inch or 16th of an inch until you get it. But the most common mistake is putting it too deep, because they think, well, most people know if it's too high, if the water coming off the back of the boat is going to create turbulence and you're not going to get anything. But so they stick it in too far. The other thing is that I used to have fun because, I run a Crestliner. I'm not sponsored by Crestliner anymore. I just tell the guys with rivets, well, I can fix your problem. Just buy a glass boat or a Crestliner. They got smooth bottoms. They don't have rivets.
Oh, man, you ain't kidding. I helped rig a friend's boat that was a riveted aluminum. And, oh, my God. I put a transducer board on there that was probably 20 inches long. And I must have moved that thing 1,000 times. And I just came to the conclusion it's going to be what it's going to be.
It is. It's really... you can get them on a riveted boat to work, but it's way more work than on a welded boat and an aluminum boat. It's just, it's just the issue. It's I've had it. I gave up on one that I couldn't get the head rivets. We were at the walleye school, and I got it up to I think 25, but you should get more than 25 miles an hour. Because most boats go over 25.
Well, and I think that the thing too is if you don't have like a tournament aluminum boat, meaning 20 plus footer, that's really about 102, 103 inches wide, the narrower ones, you just get too much from the sides or from the motor. Like there's just not enough windows in there. Does that make sense?
I don't know. I haven't really done much on the narrow boats. Most of the boats that are wider ones that I've been working on.
Yeah, the one I couldn't get, it was an 18-footer, and it just didn't matter. It's just like you said, it was a lot of disturbance on there. But losing depth on plane 2, I know some guys, like with hummingbirds, they're using Y cables. Are you familiar with that? You got any experience with that? I know I've heard some comments and things about that where...
No. I used the Y cable when that was with their old transducer, which doesn't work as good as the Mega ones. The Mega ones, I can get high speed readings with Mega off the back of the boat. I have it on. It doesn't count on my pontoon. It doesn't go that fast.
You are officially old now. Between doing what was it like? What a shuffleboard were you doing and pontoons? Your man card is getting revoked here.
Well, I have 3 boats, and I have a pontoon, I have a 16-foot tiller boat, and I have a 21-foot Crestliner. So it's you can't have. I guess you can't have too many boats, but I haven't had. I don't feel like I have too many with 3. Anyway. Yeah, it's but I use that Y cable with their older transducer because that one was really hard to get, really high, 50 mile an hour readings with, and using their little skimmer, that one works really well for high speed readings with the Y cable.
Okay, I'm going to see. I'm not purposely trying to stump you, but on the course up, heads up, I kind of got you a little bit. So here's the new one. I've used the old school, the cheapest transducer that Humminbird makes, just the old skimmer, I think it's an 83-200. Simple. I have been using the Chirp one there. You see a little bit of difference, but for what I do, just marking at speed, that's all I care about. I'm using that for running 20 to 30 miles an hour, seeing those fish, getting the least amount of clutter. So I run that on one unit. And then instead of switching things around, and maybe you can tell me if there's a better way, I hook my Mega side imaging that's on the transom to my second unit that's at the console. Now in the past, I used to turn the sonar off on the Mega side imaging, side imaging, the big giant, looks like a pancake flapper, transducer, because I would get disturbance on my 2D from the side imaging transducer. Now with the Mega side imaging, I don't seem to get that interference, and I can leave them both on.
Yeah, they call most people, not most, but a lot of fishermen, they call any noise interference. Okay, I call noise or interference that could be from the trolling motor. But crosstalk is basically noise that comes from two frequency running close together. And if you run the two together, say like, common question I get is I have trouble with my digital readouts when I run the trolling motor and the back unit, at the same time. My first question is that I said there are two different transducers firing. Yeah. Well, what happens with crosstalk is that, it's picking up the signal from the back of the boat, the front of the boat is, and it gets confused on what is the exact depth. So it loses the digital depth. And when it loses the digital depth, it loses the auto range. So now you get nothing on your screen. You lose all your screen then. Now you could fix that by going into manual range, and it'll keep working. You won't have digital depth. You'll be able to see the bottom, but you won't have the digital depth.
I use manual range a lot. Another story for another day. And maybe that's why I don't have the problems all those guys have had. Because back in the day, when everybody would talk about that, it's funny that I never thought about that. I'd be like, I don't have that problem. And they're like, you're crazy. And, I didn't.
Yep, that's because of the manual range. I've done that with different brands, not just Humminbird. It's just if you lose the digital depth, it's hard to do digital depth and get it right. You watch these companies, they'll tweak the sonar to make it better, and all of a sudden the digital depth doesn't work. And, a lot of things screw up digital depth. A big school of bait fish, all of a sudden you're in 30 feet and there's a school of bait fish at 15 feet, and all of a sudden your digital depth says 15. What does it do? Change the auto range, and you don't see the bottom anymore. Weeds are another part. They reflect the sonar so much that all the sound doesn't get down to the bottom, so it doesn't think that the bottom is there. It thinks that the bottom is higher, where the sound is reflected off the thick weeds.
I think producer dude's over here looking, and he's not knowing exactly what, but he knows we're shooting another video now. I just thought of a good tip video for people. They love the electronic videos for sure. That's
sure.
Even, as long as we've talked and as much as there's still kind of things that get stirred up, and understanding more of what's causing that problem is the biggest thing, because then you can avoid it, right? It's not just, hey, I have a problem, okay, I did this to fix it, but why? What's the bigger picture here? So
yeah, like the people with like you say you have two helixes hooked together, all you got to do is put an Ethernet cable and just tell them to use only one transducer at a time. And then only that one transducer will fire, and that isn't an issue. You can switch it back and forth, whether you're in the front of the boat or if you're driving.
It is, and a lot of these things to me just become, I don't know if lazy is a good term for it, but like I like the side imaging when I'm trolling, for example. But I may only go 300, 400 yards, and I pick up and I run back or look for new stuff. And then that 2D sonar is so important, and I don't want to go back and switch things around. And I like now, and that's why this new setup that I'm doing, I'm really, really happy with it. I mean, one of the best things I did was get this separate Dakota Lithium giant battery to run just my electronics. Things are so much cleaner. It opens up the options. The Mega is so much clearer, and being able to run these transducers separate it's really been a big deal.
Yep, I have not done just the lithium battery, but I know my electronics are clean, just running off the regular battery.
So give me one more thing. If we've got one more, we have hit a lot of the problems that people have, but give me one more that's just like you feel obligated to inform us about.
One more thing.
Yeah. I feel like I always do this with guys and then they choke. But I feel like there's got to be, because we've talked, all of these could be, good within themselves, but.
Here's a good fishing tip.
Oh.
With electronics. Catch the fish that you see on the graph.
that sounds like a Kathy Novice commercial, but go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah. But I've had that at these walleye schools, and they go, I think I graduated. I caught the fish that I saw. Now, most people don't, they don't, it has to be structure fish. Suspended fish move. You're not going to catch the fish you see. You're going to catch one of the fish you see, but you can catch the fish you see if it's on structure, because those fish tend to stay there. Walleyes act like bass when they get around certain structure. I mean, they'll live by a log, just like a bass, or they'll live by a giant boulder. And so if you see that fish on your sonar, to catch that fish, you have to get back there in seconds. You can't just turn around and slowly go back, because they do move somewhat, but they don't move like open water. They're always moving.
So you're saying like you drive your boat over the spot, you see him down there. Now you need to spin back and re-find him, and then know if he's below you or to the side of you.
Okay. So here's all the best. The easiest way to do it is what I did, how I learned fishing. See the fish, throw the buoy 20 feet to the side immediately. So I now know, there's nothing better than that, by the way, except you got to pick up the buoy every time. But you now know that that fish was spotted 20 feet from that buoy, and you can go back and look by that buoy in the area of that 20 feet from there and find that fish. You can do it with a waypoint now. But if you're going to do the waypoint, you have to put the waypoint on the fish that you see on the sonar. You can't just click a waypoint because you may be past it. What you do is you put the cursor on the fish you see, create a waypoint. Then you get on the map, and then you have to drive to the waypoint. Now, a lot of people struggle with this. I've watched them. They see me do it, and they think it's magic, but then I do it all the time. It's just like tying your shoes. Shoelaces. Whoever ties them the most is the best. I can just turn the boat around and put the boat right on that waypoint. Easy.
While you're tying your shoes, I mean, producer dude, you are 1,000% right, because I had a comment, and I don't know if you remember this or not. We shot a smallmouth show. We won't say where, but we shot a smallmouth show out of town on the Great Lakes.
Well, we can't say where we shot it, right?
We can't.
Yeah.
But we were fishing some extremely isolated stuff. I mean, like the size of a car in the middle of nowhere. And then it was like, 500 yards and another little thing. There were very specific things that one of my buddies kind of turned us on to, and so I can't say. But nevertheless, if you go back and watch that smallmouth video, some of the comments, if you remember, producer dude, were like, dude, don't you know how to use those $6,000 worth of electronics? Yeah. Why are you throwing a buoy marker? But the casting angles, any good bass guy that fishes, any specific things, like ledge fishing is the term now with a lot of the bass guys. You had to have, we were casting crankbaits one day, another day it was drop shots and stuff, but you had to cast on such specific, angles to hit that just right with the way the current was coming across it. And I mean, the spot on nature of it was, even when you knew it was there and I told you it was there, it was still really difficult to specifically do. The only way we could do it was with a buoy marker. And the comments from the people on there, it still blows my mind. Like, they just didn't get it. And if you ever do that, you'll understand why a $5 buoy marker is still your best friend, even with all of those electronics. And it made it so mindless, because then as the wind picked up, if you remember, it was easier too, because to try to not misorientate, the situation. And so 100%, I don't know if producer, if you remember that show, but it was just like, he's shaking his head. He's like, dude, I didn't care. He was just like, what were we doing? It was a smallmouth show.
I was trying to keep the show going smooth by shaking my head. Now you're calling me out.
Yeah, he's like, whatever. It was with my buddy Rob.
Yeah.
Smallmouth, yeah. So, nevertheless, a $5 deal, even if you've got those fancy electronics, it makes a difference.
Yes, low tech sometimes works better. Now, back to the, to get to that waypoint, if you're, where you're not worried about sitting on top of the fish, when and it's deep, So you just drive back to the waypoint, which is really hard for most people, but it's not that hard. You tell your boat to spot lock on the waypoint, and then you jog ahead, because when you spot lock, you're 20 feet. My boat is 20 feet from my waypoint when I spot lock on a waypoint, because my GPS is in the back of the boat and the spot lock is in the front of the boat. So, for me, I'm 20 feet away. So, if I want to be exactly on that waypoint, I just hit spot lock, go to the waypoint, spot lock's on it, and then you just jog ahead, use the jog feature, and you're sitting right on where the fish was. And anybody can do that.
I think you did not fail us. I feel like that is a great tip. Most people, when I say give me one last thing, it's just producer dude. I mean, we've had to edit people too, right?
Yeah, it's usually crickets.
Yeah, crickets.
Well, I think I've said everything. Yeah.
Yeah. You passed the test. So even if you're,
we'll have them back. We'll have them back again.
We have to?
Because
I have one more addition to that, okay?
Oh boy, he's okay.
One more.
He was going to go out on top, and now he's going to baby crash and burn. Bring it.
Okay. So what you do when you do that jog feature, you look at the chart on your Humminbird, and you can see the spot lock icon move when you use the jog feature, so you can see where you're moving it ahead of the waypoint.
That is very
instead
good.
of just guessing.
That is key. And until you have to fish a precise situation, I don't think you can appreciate how much that is valuable.
That's how you catch the fish you see, and it's a lot of my fishing.
I'm gonna throw one in there and see if you're doing this too. So myself, I now have, and I don't understand why guys don't do it. I guess it's because of clearance issues or something. I have a 15-foot talon on my boat, and until I had a 15-footer where I fish day in and day out, it really didn't matter as much, because so much of that water that I needed to be was in that, let's say 12, 13, 14, 15 feet. Because a 15-foot talon realistically is going to hold me really good in, let's say, 14 foot of water, right? And I'm using that talon so much for some of that structure stuff, because I don't want the boat to get completely over the top of them. I want to try to stay out from that a little bit. You know what I mean? I don't want to spook them. And that talon is just, and then some days I'll use it in conjunction with a spot lock, believe it or not. But sometimes that's really nice for just a quick deal. And I only have one because I have my kicker on the opposite side of the boat. But because that boat is spinning around, it actually gives me different casting angles, and I kind of like it.
Another thing about it is that when you are in shallower water than that, you can fish closer to the fish because your trolling motor isn't running. You put spot lock on, all it does is rum, 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 rum on a windy day, because the wind gusts aren't the same speed. So when the wind picks up, the trolling motor has to pick up speed. So that trolling motor is surging, dropping off, surging all the time, and fish don't like that.
It just made me think of another question, but we're going to save that till next time. That's a reason to have you back. Now, that is if you're not too busy with shuffleboard and pool hustling some poor old little lady down there in the RV camp. You know what I mean?
I'll just check my schedule.
Oh my God, what a train wreck. Oh, well, as always, I'm very appreciative for your time. It's good to catch up. We don't get to see each other as much anymore now that you're bi-coastal living, as they say. But I told another one of the old goats there the other day when we were doing a podcast that we got to get you back out here before you're too old to do it, and I want to give you a little bit of a rough ride out there.
Well, I'm not that old. I'm only 72. How old are you, Ross?
Compared to you, I'm like 12.
That was a pretty good diversion.
Yeah.
I mean,
let's try that again.
Yeah. You've got a rough 72 miles on you, though.
Yeah, Yeah, I was just thinking, since I'm in really good shape and I'm probably going to make it to 100, I may be pushing you in the wheelchair when you're in the nursing home.
Oh yeah, you should see this guy in his back.
Yeah, that's. I've got hard miles on me. I've got hard miles.
Well, that's what hard miles keep you living longer. Remember, you can quote me on this. For every calorie you burn, you get 1 more second of fishing time.
I don't even know where to go with that, but that just seems like a perfect train wreck to end on right there. In all seriousness, it was good to catch up with you. I hope we can do her again. I know the people love these different sonar tips because I don't care how long you fish or how good you think you are, whether you're Kevin Van Dam, the technology is changing faster than we can almost learn it and implement it. And, finding different ways to use some of this technology, whether you're a walleye guy or a bass guy or whatever it is, there's just so much stuff out there. And that's why, Dr. Sonar and High Tech Fishing is a really valuable resource. Make sure you check out my YouTube videos. We've got several on the specific issues that we talked about, and I know we've got a couple more that aren't coming out or are coming out that we haven't had out yet, that are already shot. That was awkward, right, producer? He's probably gonna have to just editing. Oh my God! But any rate, think of some more stuff, Bruce. When you get those people asking all the same stuff, let us know, write them down, and we'll talk about them again.
Okay.
Thanks for your time, my man. Appreciate it.
Okay.